The rain came down in relentless sheets, hammering the cracked two-lane road as Lena Harper gripped the steering wheel of her aging sedan. The windshield wipers struggled against the torrent, smearing streaks of water across the glass. Fog pooled low across the pavement, thickening with every mile. Her GPS had frozen 20 minutes earlier, the screen locked on a blank map. The last road sign she'd managed to glimpse through the haze had read, Black Hollow, -5 miles. She hadn't meant to end up here. She was supposed to be on a straight shot north, a road trip meant to clear her mind after dropping out of college. A chance to forget her failures, her parents' disappointment, the suffocating pressure of a future she no longer wanted. But now she was alone, driving through a storm on some forgotten back road, and the gas gauge was perilously low. The town appeared suddenly, materializing out of the fog like a phantom. A sagging diner crouched near the road, its neon sign sputtering. Open, across the street, loomed a shuttered church, its steeple black against the bruised sky. Farther down, the dim glow of a roadside motel spilled into the rain. Everything else looked abandoned. No movement, no cars, no signs of life. Lena pulled into the diner's gravel lot. The neon buzzed overhead as she shoved open the door and stepped inside. The air was stale, heavy with the smell of burned coffee and grease that had long soaked into the cracked vinyl booths. Every seat was empty. The place looked frozen in time, as if no one had eaten there in decades. Then, without warning, the jukebox in the corner sputtered to life. A scratchy song from the 1950s warbled through the static, too loud in the silence. A waitress emerged from the kitchen. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and a stiff smile stretched across her face, as though painted there. She slid a chipped mug of coffee onto the counter without asking. Lena blinked at her, unsettled. "Ah, thanks. How much?" The waitress shook her head. "On the house. Best get to the motel before midnight." Her voice was flat, mechanical. Then, leaning closer, her lips barely moved. "Before they wake up." A shiver threaded down Lena's spine. She forced a laugh, trying to play it off. "Right? Creepy local legend, huh?" The waitress didn't answer. She just turned back toward the kitchen. For a split second, the door swung wide enough for Lena to glimpse what lay beyond. Something red glistened on the tiles. A refrigerator. Door hung open, and down its edge ran a thin trickle of blood. She thought she saw something pale lying on the floor, something that looked disturbingly like a severed hand. The door swung shut before she could be sure. The waitress reappeared almost instantly, wiping her hands on her apron, her frozen smile never faltering. Lena swallowed hard. She shoved a few bills onto the counter, though no price had been named, and backed out into the rain. The motel sat, hunched, at the far end of the street. Its sign flickered weakly. Vacancy. Inside, the lobby reeked of mildew. An old man at the desk barely looked up when she entered. His skin sagged against his bones, his eyes watery and vacant. She asked for a room. He slid a key across the counter, his hand trembling. As she reached for it, his lips parted. Stay inside. Do not look outside the windows after midnight. Lena hesitated. Is this a joke? But the old man just lowered his gaze. The key lay cold and heavy in her palm. Her room was on the second floor. The carpet was threadbare, the wallpaper peeling in yellow curls. A single bulb cast a sickly light. She dropped her backpack onto the bed and collapsed beside it, exhaustion tugging at her. Maybe the storm would clear by morning. Maybe she could laugh about this later. But sleep didn't come easily. Sometime after 11, she woke to a sound. A dragging, shuffling noise outside her door. She sat upright, straining to listen. The hallway creaked with weight, as if something heavy was being hauled across it. Heart pounding, she crept to the door and pressed her ear against the wood. A wet squelch. Then a thud, summoning her courage. She twisted the knob and cracked the door open. The hallway was dark. Water dripped steadily from the ceiling, though there had been no leak before. A trail of crimson smeared across the threadbare carpet, leading toward the stairwell. Her stomach lurched. The metallic temps of blood clung to the air. Something caught her eye on the wall. Words had been gouged into the plaster by fingernails. Letters jagged and uneven. We belong to Black Hollow now. Lena slammed the door shut and locked it, her breath ragged. She stumbled back to the bed, pressing her shaking hands against her face. The sound came again, this time from the window, whispering. Dozens of voices murmuring in unison. She turned slowly, dread locking her muscles. Shadows swarmed against the glass, their forms warped and elongated. One pressed close enough for her to see its face. Half of its jaw was missing, dangling by threads of sinew. Empty sockets wept, streams of black blood. The whispers grew louder, more frantic. The church bell tolled. Midnight. The window rattled violently. The shadows pressed harder, their limbs stretching impossibly long. The glass cracked. Lena backed toward the door, but before she could reach it, the bulb overhead flickered and burst. Darkness swallowed the room. In the silence that followed, a wet breath sighed against her ear. She screamed and bolted into the hallway. The bloody trail gleamed in the dim emergency light. She ran, feet slipping in the slick crimson. At the stairwell, she stumbled, her hand smearing a bloody handprint down the rail. She didn't look back. She couldn't. The church doors stood open across the street, light spilling from within. She sprinted toward it, rain soaking her clothes, the storm howling overhead. Inside, candles flickered along the walls. Pews stood filled, not with living parishioners, but with rotting corpses propped upright. Their skin sagged, their bones jutted. Some had no eyes. Others stared with milky whites. Yet every one of them turned their heads as she entered. A woman near the front rose to her feet. Half her skull was caved in, gray matter glistening under the candlelight. Her smile was wide, lips split and bleeding. She spoke, and the words were echoed by every corpse in the church. Stay with us forever. The whisper was deafening, a chorus of death. The bodies began to move, rising from the pews, their joints cracking. One lurched toward her, its stomach ripped open, entrails dragging across the floor. Another clawed forward with skeletal fingers, nails tearing from the bone. The air reeked of decay. Lena staggered back, but the doors slammed shut behind her. She was trapped. The congregation advanced, their whispers rising to screams. She turned and fled down the aisle, leaping over pews, shoving past grasping hands. At the altar, she saw a stairwell descending into blackness. With no other choice, she plunged down. The basement was colder than the grave. Candles lined the walls, but their light barely pierced the gloom. The floor was slick, wet beneath her. Shoes. She looked down and choked back a sob. She was standing in a pool of blood. Floating in it were limbs, arms, legs, torsos hacked apart and stripped of flesh. Faces bobbed to the surface, mouths frozen in silent screams. She gagged and stumbled forward. In the center of the room stood an altar made of bone. Skulls were stacked in neat towers, their jaws agape. Upon the altar lay a body, fresh and glistening. The chest cavity had been split open, ribs pried apart. The heart was missing. Footsteps echoed behind her. She spun. The waitress stood there, apron soaked red, a carving knife clutched in her fist. Her painted smile had twisted into something feral. Her face seemed to melt in the candlelight. Skin peeling back to reveal muscle and bone beneath. "Welcome home, Lena," she crooned. "We've saved you a seat at the table." The corpses crowded the stairwell, pressing in. The whispers shook the walls. Lena screamed and shoved past the waitress, bolting up the stairs, slipping on blood. She burst back into the church, then into the storm, her lungs burning. She ran blindly, desperate to escape. She found the road and followed it, feet pounding the wet asphalt. But after miles of running, the rain parted just enough for her to see where she was. The motel loomed ahead, the same diner, the same church. She had returned to where she started. The neon sign flickered. Vacancy. Her sob caught in her throat. She turned, but the road behind her was gone, swallowed by fog. The town encircled her, endless and inescapable. The whispers rose again, surrounding her from every direction. The motel door opened. The old man stood there, his face peeled halfway. From his skull, eyes rolling in different directions. Behind him, the waitress held a pot that steamed with a thick, meaty smell. Bones jutted from the broth ribs, vertebrae, fingers. Dinner's ready, she said sweetly. The jukebox blared to life across the street, its scratchy tune nearly drowning the screams that followed. And Lena Harper was never seen again outside of Black Hollow. Some say if you drive that road on a stormy night, you'll hear the church bell toll at midnight. You'll see the diner's neon flicker, the motel's vacancy sign glowing like a trap. And if you look closely enough through the fog, you might see a figure at the window of the second-floor room. A young woman, her face pale and bloody still, pounding on the glass, begging to be let out. But the road only goes one way now, into Black Hollow, and it never lets you leave.
Please like and subscribe channel Fear Frequency for more horror stories. Thank you.